in a few minutes. So let me start this meeting to order here. Steve, if you can help me out here, I would appreciate it. Welcome to the March 21 mob of the Sherlockians of Baltimore. We've gone back to our roots. When we started 5 years ago, we never had the meeting in the month we were supposed to, so we're kind of going back. The March 21st mob was postponed earlier this year. There was a little thing called COVID-19. You might have heard of it. At that time, 90% of you had never heard of Zoom at that point in time. So we're gonna have to pay some bills here. So we're gonna have a quick word from our commercial sponsor, and we'll have that commercial coming up next.
Well, it's unfortunate, Holmes. His lordship feels that his daughter is just a little bonkers. Assumption based on her wardrobe, no doubt. True, Holmes, sure. In the West Wing, her ladyship appears in the most stylish mini costume. Elsewhere in the house, Maxie. Minnie. Maxie. Minnie. Maxie.
Watson, this mini Maxie mix-up is caused by outmoded heating. His lordship needs advice from a heating expert.
Well, Holmes, who is this man?
An Esso home comfort expert. He can size up a whole house and tell exactly which one of the 28 Esso furnaces will give you comfort, with all the economy that oil is famous for.
So expert, and so experienced, and so guaranteed furnaces. Very comforting. I say, Holmes, that's marvelous.
Perfect. That commercial was from 1970 and played in the UK. That was a company called Esso. For you young kids who have never heard of Esso, you now know it as Exxon. We will also refer to you as punks from this point onward. Some suggestions in housekeeping here. If you haven't done so already, please open your chat window. Otherwise, you'll have annoying pop-up messages at the bottom of your screen during the entire meeting. Also, please maximize your Zoom window by double-clicking on it. That'll take up the entire screen there so you can see things a little bit larger. If you're not speaking at the current time, please mute yourself. It's amazing what sounds are picked up by the speakers here. If you're tapping on the keyboard, you have a cat sitting right next to the monitor and it purring, guess what shows up on screen at times? This meeting is being recorded. Please turn off your camera if you're in the witness relocation program. Likewise, don't use chat and don't speak. If you'd like a transcript of this meeting, you'll need to have paper and pencil handy and be able to write very quickly. No small animals were harmed in creating this meeting, and most of all, have fun. So we are so glad that you've joined us here. We have over 100 people registered from this meeting. In glancing at the reports, we have 8 different time zones represented here today. So, so our friends in the UK, France, Germany, and the rest of Europe, good evening. To those of you here in the Eastern Canada, United States, good afternoon. And for those of you on the West Coast in Hawaii, good morning. We're so glad that you could join us. At this point in time, we like to have our first toast. Most groups have a toast to the woman. We do ours to the man. A toast to Mr. Sherlock Holmes. It's being given by the top knot of this scion group, his last bow, a group of Sherlockians who like bow ties, Mr. Dan Andriaco. Dan, the floor is yours. Please unmute.
Thank you, Greg. Christopher Morley called his annotated anthology, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, a textbook of friendship for good reason. Friendship is the glue that holds the canon together. You will recall that on that stormy September night, when John Openshaw rang the bell at 221B Baker Street, the good doctor asked Holmes, "Who could come tonight? Some friend of yours, perhaps?" Holmes's response, "Except yourself, I have none," strikes us as rather poignant. Happily, it is also untrue. For surely Inspector G. Lestrade, who had a habit of looking in at 221B of an evening, must be considered a friend. And what about Mrs. Hudson and Billy? They were there even when Watson left home for a wife, or 3. Moreover, friends of the world's first consulting detective are not to be found only in Baker Street. They span the globe and the decades. They are to be found in small villages and great metropolises, alone with their books, or found joined with other like-minded eccentrics in almost 1,000 societies around the world devoted to the master. And today, at this moment, they're here on Zoom. We, dear comrades, are indisputably the friends of Sherlock Holmes. And so we raise our glasses or mugs in a toast to him whom we shall ever regard as the best and wisest man whom we've ever known, Mr. Sherlock Holmes of Baker Street.
Thank you, Dan. Dan, would you have any recommendations for possible books for Christmas coming up later on this year or possibly next year?
Why, yes, I do, Greg. Here is Sherlock Holmes, A Three-Pipe Christmas, which Julie mentioned at the beginning. I think it would be a great Christmas present. It brings together the Blue Carbuncle, the unique Hamlet, and the unique Dickensians with unique essays on each one. And in fact, 5 of the contributors to this book are here on this meeting: Julie McCarris, Monica Schmidt, Randall Stock, Roger Johnson, and myself.
So thank you, Daniel. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
At this point in time, we'd like to call on Evie Herzog for a toast to her investiture of Miss Etta Cohn. Evie?
Got it. I'm just gonna push in front of you. Etta Cohn, my chosen investiture in our group, was a Victorian lady and a bit of an adventuress in her own quiet way. Her parents and later her older brothers worked hard and were successful in business. Etta and her elder sister Clarabelle were well off and in their 30s decided to see a bit of the world. From 1901 on, they took yearly trips to Europe. The Cohn sisters were not mere sightseers, however. No queuing up for fried fish wrapped in newspaper and bags of saltwater taffy in Brighton for them, nor slogging along rough terrain in order to get a close-up view of Stonehenge. No, they had an eye for the recherche and an interest in art, and they gravitated to Paris. Somewhat by chance, in Paris, they resumed a friendship with Gertrude Stein and her brother Leo, a friendship which had begun some years earlier in Baltimore. The Steins naturally introduced the Cohns to their artist friends, and both sisters caught the collecting bug. As time went on, works by Picasso, Cézanne, Matisse, Gauguin, Van Gogh or Van Gogh, and others came to Baltimore in their care. As many of you Baltimoreans know, the majority of their collections were left to the Baltimore Museum of Art for us all to enjoy. The reconstruction of the sisters' sitting room in the BMA will strike a familiar chord in all Sherlockians. Even further, there is now a virtual recreation of the ladies' adjoining apartments in Bolton Hill, showing how they lived surrounded by their art. So much for a brief look at Etta Cohn's public life, but surely there is more to learn. Did this Victorian lady ever encounter any canonical characters in her many transatlantic trips? Did she ever come to Baker Street as a client? Did Sherlock Holmes' fascination with one adventuress extend to another? When I find out, I'll be sure to let you all know.
Thank you, Evie. This will probably be a good time to explain how membership in the Sherlockians of Baltimore work. All of you here today can now consider yourselves to be an SOB, a Sherlockians of Baltimore. That also means that if anyone ever calls you an SOB, you are now part of that rank. And there are 3 ways to go up to the next level. After you attend your second meeting, you become a card-carrying SOB. You'll be giving a membership card at your second meeting. And then if you give a presentation, lead a story discussion, or prepare the quiz for a meeting, you become a certified SOB with a moniker that has a Baltimore base into it. We're going to switch over into some blatant commercialism right now. First, we have lapel pins. Lapel pins are $10 each plus $4.95 for shipping and handling. You can actually get 2 pins for that price in shipping, so you might as well buy 2. Tom is also selling lapel pins for the Red Circle out of DC. You can contact Tom at his email there Tom, I think, is on the call now. Tom, can you unmute yourself? And did I miss anything?
No, you covered it all. The fact that we do take cash in small unmarked bills, checks, PayPal is also available. So any of those three, and we can work out details if you contact me at that address that's on the screen now. And again, don't limit yourself to 2. You can have as many red circle, as many SOB pins, and the shipping is $4.95 for the entire order. So $10 a pin, $4.95 entire order. You can become a local street corner dealer if you wish. We can work that out.
Fantastic. But wait, there's more. We have back issues of our annual journal. The newspaper is also available. There are 4 years. Each volume is $20. Shipping and handling is another $5. Again, multiple copies can be sent for the $5 shipping price. So you might as well buy all 4 copies. If you have a wobbly table or something, 1 or 2 volumes can be slid underneath that wobbly table to balance things out. We are also working on the 2021 volume. It will feature the local Baltimore newspaper, the Deutsche Correspondence, which surprisingly went out of business during World War I here in the United States. We are currently accepting submissions. If you send us something, you can tell all the people, I can't believe those SOBs published me in the newspapers. We look forward to having your work here. Feel free to contact us at our email address. And this will be published in the summer of 2021. We also had some breaking news here. Last night around 10 p.m., Netflix and the Conan Doyle estate settled their lawsuit out of court. So that has been now resolved here. There have been no details announced at this point in time. But if you turn into Eyewitness News a little bit later on tonight, hopefully they'll have some details for you there. At this time, it is time for our feature presentation. Roger, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
Fantastic. So nice of you to join us. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry it took so long. I was there used to be a regular feature in Private Eye magazine, New Technology Baffles Pissed Old Hack. And I was feeling a bit like that this evening. Anyway, here we are. Thank you. So I'm just going to share the screen. At least I hope I am. Select a window. And okay, let's go to, come on. Oh, you're there somewhere. I know you're there somewhere. Just want to get the slideshow up. Start slideshow. Ah, yes, hurrah. Can you see that? Rugger, Romance, and Sherlock Holmes. Okay. Blackheath. Subtitle, Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and the Blackheath Connection. Blackheath is a suburb of London, southeast London, but it wasn't always regarded as that. My 1895 Chambers Concise Gazetteer describes Blackheath rather differently. It's a high-lying open common of 70 acres in the county of Kent, 7 miles southeast of London, near Greenwich Park. It is a favourite holiday resort for Londoners. Blackheath was the first place in England, get this, where the ancient Scottish game of golf was introduced, most likely in 1608. So as far as Chambers was concerned, Blackheath was the heath only. But, there we are. The heath itself was acquired for London as an open space in 1871, and a village began to develop from the houses and shops that have been established. Rather pretty village, very interesting, very pleasant place to be. Let's move on for a moment from the place to the man, or one of them, Arthur Conan Doyle. His interests, as we know, were many and varied. Among them was sport, all sorts of sport. He said in his memoirs, "I was a keen cricketer as a boy. And finally, I fulfilled a secret ambition by getting into the fringe of first-class cricket." First-class cricket is the equivalent, if you like, of Major League Baseball. Though, he goes on, perhaps it was rather through the good nature of others than my own merit. But he did play cricket, and very successfully, at school. This photo of the cricket team, or at least 8 of them, at Stonyhurst, when Conan Doyle was 14 years old, and there he is standing at the back on the right. Now, he says, a bowler, read picture if you like, a bowler has many days when everything is against him, but he has his recompense with many a stroke of good fortune. And it was in such a moment that I had the good luck to get the wicket of W.G. Grace, the greatest of all cricketers. This was a match in which Conan Doyle was playing for the MCC, the Marylebone Cricket Club, and where is Baker Street? Marylebone, against London County, not at Lord's, not at one of the great cricket grounds, but at Crystal Palace Park. It was August 1900. It was his first-class debut, and it was his only first-class wicket. And the joy didn't last forever. He goes on, WG had his speedy revenge. There was nothing more childlike and bland than that slow, tossed-up bowling of his, and nothing more subtle and treacherous. This actually did take place at Lord's, the great cricket ground, the home of cricket. And he was bowled out for no runs. Sad. Blackheath was a site of cricket. There still is a Blackheath Cricket Club. And here they are, sometime around 1880, 1890, playing on the heath. But we mentioned golf earlier. What is now the Royal Blackheath Golf Club, the oldest in England, has a rich and illustrious history, and Conan Doyle enjoyed golf. He said, "I was an enthusiastic but very inefficient golfer. But surely it's a great testimony to the qualities of a game when a man can be both enthusiastic and inefficient. It's a proof, at least, that a man plays for the game's sake and not for personal kudos." And yes, golf was played on the heath. He goes on to a sport that I don't think was played on the heath itself. He says, if boxing is the finest single-man sport, no boxing, I think that rugby football is the best collective one. And yes, rugby was played on the heath. There still is. Well, we'll get to it. Doyle says, I played for a short time as a forward in the Edinburgh University team, but my want of knowledge of the game was too heavy a handicap. Now, rugby football, is closer to the Gaelic, Australian rules and American games than it is to soccer, association football. If I were a literalist, which I'm afraid I am, I would say that only soccer is true football because players are forbidden to handle the ball, apart from the goalkeeper, of course. But that is actually a comparatively late innovation. Conan Doyle didn't succeed at rugby. He did very well at soccer. He played first in goal and then in one of the back positions, what they now call defence, for Portsmouth, when that famous club, he says, was an amateur organisation. It's long since gone professional, like all the major clubs. Now, Conan Doyle must have made many visits to Blackheath, but there's only one documented. Today, although sport flourishes there, the various clubs have their own grounds. But as you'll have gathered, he could have watched it all on the heath itself, and I'm quite sure that it's sport that took him there in the first place, especially rugby. Blackheath Football Club is the oldest documented rugby club in England, founded in 1858. Compare that to the oldest club in the National Football League, the Arizona Cardinals, who date from 40 years later. Conan Doyle knew about the reputation of Blackheath Football Club, of course, and he knew a couple of the players. He recalls in his memoirs, "In my last year of study at Edinburgh, I formed a friendship with a remarkable student. He came from a famous medical family. He came also of a famous athletic stock and was a great rugby forward himself, although rather handicapped by the berserk fury with which he would play. That was this man, Dr. George Turnavine Budd, who invited the newly qualified Conan Doyle to join him in his medical practice in Plymouth. The conditions at this practice, Conan Doyle says, were incredible. In a short time, this man, half genius and half quack, had founded a practice worth several £1,000s worth of ready money in the year. Free consultations, but pay for your medicine. That was his slogan, and as he charged a good price for the latter, it worked out all the same in the end. I've no doubt he did a great deal of good, for there was reason and knowledge behind all that he did, but his manner of doing it was unorthodox in the extreme. And yes, you probably guessed, Budd played for Blackheath. There he is on the right of the second row. He was up to international form, says Conan Doyle, and his younger brother was reckoned by good judges to be about the best forward who ever donned the rose-embroidered jersey of England. That younger brother was Arthur, and there he is at the top row, far left. Well, the partnership in Plymouth, as you probably know, didn't last. Conan Doyle moved 150 miles east to Portsmouth, where he set up his own practice in the pleasant suburb of Southsea. Yes, it says Bush Villa there, and that is Conan Doyle leaning up against his own gatepost. The address was actually number 1 Bush Villas. In 1885, he married Louise Hawkins, and it was at this address, number 1 Bush Villas, Southsea, that he wrote the first 2 adventures of Sherlock Holmes, The Study in Scarlet and The Sign of the Four. He and Louise had a daughter, Mary, who was born in 1885. 6 years later, they moved to London, suburban London, or to put it more accurately for the time, Surrey. They went to this address, number 12 Tennyson Road, Norwood. And it's there that their son Kingsley was born in 1882. It's also there that he wrote the stories that were published in the Strand magazine, the adventures of Sherlock Holmes and the memoirs. Although I put Collier's there, the return of Sherlock Holmes actually came later. What has all this to do with Blackheath? The first connection comes in adventure number 6, The Man with the Twisted Lip. "Now, Watson," said Holmes, as the tall dog cart dashed up through the gloom, throwing out 2 golden tunnels of yellow light from its side lanterns. "You'll come with me, won't you?" "Oh, if I can be of use." "Oh, a trusty comrade is always of use, and a chronicler still more so. My room at the Cedars is a double-bedded one." The Cedars. Yes, that's Mr. Sinclair's house. I'm staying there while I conduct the inquiry. Where is it then? Near Lee in Kent. We have a 7-mile drive before us. Well, most unusually, Dr. Watson has not disguised the address. The Cedars was a real house. It still exists. It's on the edge of what was then the village of Lee, and on the edge of Blackheath. It's within easy walking distance of Blackheath Station. Now, you'll recall that the alter ego of Mr. Neville Sinclair was the beggar Hugh Boone. The name certainly came from Boone's Chapel. It's the only surviving structure of the almshouses endowed in 1683 by Christopher Boone of Lee Place. The chapel is very close, within a couple of streets of the Cedars, and its recent restoration was the first project of the Blackheath Historic Buildings Trust. Well, moving on a little, in 1896 or 97, Conan Doyle met the woman who was to become his second wife. Yes, Jean Leckie. You may know that their daughter Jean said that his first sight of her was seeing her play rounders at Blackheath. Rounders, sort of primitive version of baseball. So it was sport, again, that got the two of them together. We don't know when precisely they met for the first time. Conan Doyle's only recorded visit to Blackheath was on an unknown day in February 1899, when he and his brother Innes went to lunch there with Jean Leckie and her parents. This was their house. It still stands. The address is now number 10 The Glebe, and it's about halfway between Blackheath Station and the Cedars. All this while, Louise, Tui, as she was called, she was diagnosed with TB, tuberculosis, in November 1893, and Arthur was determined to keep her alive and as well as possible for as long as he could. The family went to Egypt, to Switzerland, and finally found what was recommended as a healthy climate in the Surrey Hills, south of London. The house is called Undershaw. He had it built. The house, as you know, still stands. And it's there that he wrote The Hound of the Baskervilles and The Return of Sherlock Holmes. And it's in the second story, I think it is, in The Return, that we return to Blackheath, the Norwood builder. Holmes and Watson have an unexpected visitor at 221B, John Hector McFarlane, who is suspected of murdering Joseph Oldacre. He tells them, I live at Torrington Lodge, Blackheath, with my parents, Mr. Holmes. But last night, having to do business very late with Mr. Jonas Oldacre, I stayed at an hotel in Norwood and came to my business from there. I knew nothing of this terrible affair until I was in the train. When I read what you've just heard, I at once saw the horrible danger of my position, and I hurried to put the case into your hands. I have no doubt that I should have been arrested either at my city office or at my home. A man followed me from London Bridge Station, and I have no doubt. Great heaven! What's that? Well, what's that, of course, is the arrival of Inspector Lestrade and the arrest of John Hector McFarlane. Holmes decides not, in the first instance, to go to Norwood. His first movement, Watson said he must be in the direction of Blackheath. In fact, he was going, of course, to visit McFarlane's mother at Torrington Lodge. Well, there isn't and wasn't a Torrington Lodge in Blackheath, but there was a house called Torrington Villa, and it was not far from the house where James Leckie and his family lived before they moved to Glebe House. Conan Doyle very naively assumed that the innocent nature of his relationship was evident to everyone, which it certainly wasn't. In 1900, his brother-in-law, Willie Hornung, was surprised to see Arthur and Jean together at Lord's cricket ground. After discussing the matter with his wife, Connie, Hornung told Conan Doyle that this was very bad form. Conan Doyle became rather angry, but as Georgina Doyle said in her book Out of the Shadows, The Untold Story of Arthur Conan Doyle's First Family, in those days it was unthinkable for a man to appear in a public place like Lord's with a woman who was neither his wife nor a close member of the family. Connie and Willie knew this well and would only have seen Arthur, a middle-aged man, making a fool of himself over a young woman. Georgina, who is now Lady Wilson, is the widow of Sir Arthur's nephew, Brigadier John Doyle. You may recognize the name of E.W. Hornung as the creator of A.J. Raffles, the gentleman burglar. He and his friend Bunny Manders were created undoubtedly as a sort of distorted mirror image of Holmes and Watson. We go back to Blackheath, or at least there's a mention of Blackheath, in another story in The Return, The Adventure of the Missing Three-Quarter. Not wholly surprising, as football is a theme throughout this particular story. There's another unexpected visitor, Cyril Overton, captain of the Cambridge University rugby team, who's desperate to find one of his players, Geoffrey Staunton. Watson says, Holmes stretched out his hand and took down letter S of his commonplace book. For once he dug in vain into that mine of varied information. There is Arthur H. Staunton, the rising young forger, says he, and there was Henry Staunton, whom I helped to hang. But Godfrey Staunton is a new name to me. Great Scott, cried the athlete. I didn't think there was a soul in England who didn't know Godfrey Staunton, the crack three-quarter, Cambridge, Blackheath, and 5 internationals. Good Lord, Mr. Holmes, where have you lived? Well, where he'd lived was probably some distance away from a rugger ground, who can say? Here's another observation from Georgina Doyle's book Out of the Shadows. She says, let me deal with another myth that has come to be widely believed. This is that Louise knew nothing of her husband's infatuation with Jean, as if this made everything all right. In fact, of course, she knew, and his daughter Mary made this quite clear to my husband John. Given Louise's nature, she accepted the situation with dignity and understanding, but it is sad that her last years should have been darkened by the shadow of a young woman waiting to take her place. Louise died on the 4th of July, 1906, nearly 13 years after her TB was diagnosed, and the doctors had said, oh, you only got a matter of months to live. There is no doubt that it was Arthur's skill and determination that enabled her to enjoy those extra years with her family. The following year, Arthur married Jean Leckie. He says, on the 18th of September, 1907, I married Miss Jean Leckie, the younger daughter of a Blackheath family whom I had known for years, and who was a dear friend of my mother and sister. He doesn't say which of his 4 sisters, but it was probably Josephine, known as Dodo, whose husband, the Reverend Cyril Angel, conducted the wedding at St. Margaret's Church, Westminster. They moved from Undershore. Arthur says, my wife's people had a house at Crowborough. and there they'd gone to reside, as they were very attached. I thought it'd be a happy arrangement not to separate them, so I bought a house close by named Windlesham. Thus it came about that in 1907 I left Undershore Hindhead after 10 years' residence and moved myself and my belongings to the Highlands of Sussex, where I still dwell in the few months of settled life which give me a rest between my wanderings. It was during the time at Crowborough that their children were born. Dennis, 1909, Adrian, 1910, and a couple of years later, Jean. Well, then came the First World War. Jean's brother Malcolm had studied medicine at Guy's Hospital and made captain of the hockey club. He played hockey for Blackheath, for Kent, and later for the Army, as well as at international level for England. On qualifying as a doctor, he joined the Royal Army Medical Corps. At the outbreak of war, Captain Leckie was attached to the 1st Battalion. Guess which regiment? The Northumberland Fusiliers. Within days, he was severely injured by shrapnel while attending to wounded. He was taken prisoner by the advancing Germans, and he died from his wounds on the 29th of August, 1914, only days after the war had started. He was 34 years old. Malcolm's death was followed in 1915 by that of Arthur's nephew, Oscar Hornung, and his sister Lottie's husband, Captain Leslie Olding. Sometime towards the end of 1915, a woman called Lily Loder Simmons, who was a close friend of Jean and had been a bridesmaid at their wedding, claimed to have received a message from Malcolm in the form of automatic writing. Arthur was convinced that the message was genuine, and he became a complete convert to spiritualism. Arthur's son, Kingsley, died right at the end of the war in the Spanish flu epidemic, his resistance fatally affected by wounds sustained as far back as 1916. And the following year, Innes, Arthur's younger brother, died of pneumonia. It was his son, John, who married Georgina. As you might expect, it was some years later that we return to Blackheath in the story of the Sussex vampire. Now, this is probably the best known mention of Blackheath in the stories. Holmes receives a letter from Robert Ferguson, who says at the end, P.S. I believe your friend Watson played rugby for Blackheath when I was 3/4 for Richmond. It was the, I didn't mean that to happen. Get back, get back. Sorry about that. It's the only personal introduction which I can give. Watson says, of course I remember him. Big Bob Ferguson, the finest 3/4 Richmond ever had. And promptly at 10 o'clock next morning, Ferguson strode into the room. Hello, Watson, said he, and his voice was still deep and hearty. You don't look quite the man you did when I threw you over the ropes into the crowd at the old deer park. I expect I've changed a bit also, but it's this last day or two that has aged me. So we know that Watson played rugger for Blackheath. Now, in 1989, it was reported that these two men, Paul Rossiter Marvel, the secretary, and Martin Turner, a former international 3/4, note the position, of Blackheath Football Club, are holding an aged jersey recently discovered among the club's archives. While it cannot be absolutely guaranteed to be the one worn by Watson when he played against Big Bob Ferguson of Richmond in the 1870s, it's certainly of the style and pattern which he would have worn. It is to be put on display in the club's pavilion. Well, I can't guarantee that it is actually still on display at the club's pavilion. Let's hope so. The last canonical mention of Blackheath comes in the story of the retired colourman, published in December 1926. Holmes sends Watson to investigate the scene of the crime. And Watson says, "And so it was that on a summer afternoon I set forth to Lewisham, little dreaming that within a week the affair in which I was engaging would be the eager debate of all England. I should not have known which was the haven had I not asked a lounger who was smoking in the street, a tall, dark, heavily moustached, rather military-looking man. He nodded in answer to my inquiry and gave me a curiously questioning glance. Having interviewed the client, Watson then leaves and says, I had driven to the Blackheath Station and had caught my train there when, just as it was starting, I saw a man dart into the carriage next to my own. It was undoubtedly the tall, dark man whom I'd addressed in the street." Well, the haven is in Lewisham. There is a railway station, at least one in Lewisham, but Watson chose to go by way of Blackheath. This may have been for purely practical reasons, or he may have had a desire to revisit his old rugger club. Who can say? All we know is that he did. The station, rather pleasingly, still looks very much like this, apart from the locomotive and the people's dresses. And suits, I should say. Yeah, don't misunderstand me there. Arthur Conan Doyle died on the 7th of July, 1930, and his last recorded words were to his wife, Jean. He said, "You are wonderful." I'm going to bring in and finish on another story which does not specifically mention Blackheath. The case of the stolen submarine plans, the Bruce Partington plans. And I didn't mean to do that. Let's try that again. Oh, isn't life fun when you're not technically minded? Come on. There we go. Yes, nice little, well, I think they're nice. I made them myself, mock-up of the plans. But this story returns us in an odd way to the Cedars at Belmont Hill in Lee. It was in the mid-19th century the home of a man called John Penn, an English marine engineer whose firm was preeminent in the middle of the century due to his innovations in engine and propeller systems, which led his firm to be the major supplier to the Royal Navy as it made the transition from sail to steam power. In 1859, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. By the time of his death, his firm had built engines for 735 ships, ranging from river ferries to battleships. He would not, of course, have created an engine for a submarine. He died before that would have been possible. But I have a strong suspicion that it was the connection with that sort of area of southeast London, what's now southeast London, that led Conan Doyle to house the Bruce Partington plans, not at a naval institute, but at the Royal Arsenal at Woolwich, which is only a matter of a couple of miles away. So, where are we? Oh, yes. Penn, apart from the advancements made in marine engineering, he is remembered in Greenwich through street names and the names of buildings. You can see his name on the streets and the buildings. And in 1907, his wife was apparently still living at the Cedars. Well, as I say, he was made a member of the Royal Society, and he was a founder member in 1860 of the Royal Institution of Naval Architects. And you're probably wondering, if you're looking at this, why we have a picture of the Sherlock Holmes pub in London. Well, because the building next to it, with its 2 front doors, is the Royal Institution of Naval Architects. So possibly they have the originals of the Bruce Partington plans, who can say? Inside the pub, on a shelf in front of the Encyclopedia Britannica, you may notice among the photographs there is the photograph of the Blackheath rugger team of 1878-79. If, as we believe, Watson played for Blackheath, that's the team he would have been in. So it all comes round and comes back to Blackheath. And I do urge you, if you come to London, do visit Blackheath. It's well worth it. Thank you very much. There we go.
Thank you, Roger. I am sure we'll have some questions. So the way we're going to handle this, if someone has a question for Roger, please go into the chat feature, just type the word question. I will then call on you to unmute, and then you can ask your question of Roger. So, a lot of feedback complimenting you on the program. Do we have any questions for Roger? True pleasure, well done, fascinating, great presentation, excellent talk.
What I'd like to hear.
Tom Simkin has a question. Tom, can you unmute yourself and ask your question for Roger?
Sure. Well, very simple question, Roger, and thanks for a terrific presentation. Could we ask, what's your connection to Blackheath and why you're so interested in it, and what led you to make the presentation?
About 3 years ago, as one of my positions in the Sherlock Holmes Society of London is press and publicity officer. That sounds terribly important. All it really means is that it's my contact details on the website and in various directories. And I got an inquiry from the Blackheath Society asking if I knew someone who could give a talk about Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and the Blackheath connection. I had never been to Blackheath. I thought, this sounds interesting. I'll do it. So I did. And what you've heard this evening is about half of the talk I gave there. It went down very well. They want me back.
Very
Thanks
nice.
so much.
Phil Burgham, did you have a question? Please unmute and ask.
Not so much a question as a thank you and appreciation on telling us the location of Glebe House. It's one of the few spots associated with Conan Doyle's life that I hadn't been able to figure out. Of course, figured out the Glebe, but not actually the Glebe House. And I've been mentally in Blackheath quite a bit for the last 2 years, working on books and research. But lovely.
Okay, well, Glebe House is now number 10, the Glebe. You won't get a very good view of it from the road because there are large trees and bushes in front of it. But if you are a bit sneaky with your camera, you may get a good enough view to be certain that it is the same building as the one in the old photograph. And it is.
Where did you find the old photograph? That's another thing that I hadn't been able to come across.
Oh, God. I think I copied it from Kelvin Jones's book, Sherlock Holmes and the Kent Railways.
Okay, excellent. I think I have that one in my collection. That's the hard part when you've got a lot of books, is you don't remember where you found them. But thank you extremely much.
Oh, tell me about it.
Thank you, Phil. MC Black, did you have a question, sir?
Well, can you all hear me, chaps?
Yeah.
Can anybody hear me?
you.
Last time I was at Blackheath Rugby Club, there was a portrait in the clubhouse of John Watson wearing a Blackheath jersey.
Yeah.
And that was in the days before one carried a camera in one's telephone. Otherwise, I would have photographed it. But it's certainly there in a room towards the bottom of the clubhouse. Next time I'm in the area, I will see if I can get in and photograph it. But of course, one can't go anywhere these days because of COVID. While I've been listening to Roger's talk, I've actually got a copy of the 1895 A to Z of London, and I've been following the places that Roger's been mentioning while he's been talking. And the Cedars is certainly marked on that, and the Glebe is marked, and Torrington Villas and Blackheath Station, of course. So yes, it's fascinating.
Wow.
They're all within half a page. I guess Roger has got that atlas.
I haven't actually, but I have a large-scale map of the area, digital. I had forgotten about that painting of Watson. It is reproduced somewhere, and I cannot, for the life of me, remember where. I have seen it, not the painting itself, but the photograph.
My recollection is it was a colour photograph. I should have to go there and see what I can find. And of course, if I take it, there's not going to be any copyright problems. There's also Alan Godfrey's maps of Victorian London in separate sheets, but the version I've got is quite a large scale. And I think this is something like I'm just looking, 9 inch to the mile.
Excellent. I'll look out for it. Thanks very much.
If you want the, it's Harry Margery was the publisher.
Yeah. Thanks. I've got some of the Godfrey maps.
No,
yes, excellent book.
Yes. I don't know, can people see that?
Thank you.
It's not terribly expensive and well worth it if you're looking into Victorian London. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be monopolising this.
No, we're good. Thank you, MC. We have time for 2 more questions. The next one comes from John Geehan from Toronto. John, if you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Roger. Great presentation. As someone who has no knowledge of rugby whatsoever, I've always been intrigued by, in the postscript to the letter, when the gentleman's name escapes you right now, asked Watson if he remembers him throwing him over the ropes during a game. Is rugby that rough?
I'm not a footballer in any particular discipline at all, and if you saw me, you wouldn't be surprised at that. But I do know that rugby has been described as a hooligan's game played by gentlemen, and evidently sometimes the hooliganism takes over. You'll remember that Conan Doyle said that George Budd played with a berserk fury. Maybe Big Bob Ferguson did as well.
Right. Roger, can I come in on that, please? There's 2 modes of rugby. There's rugby union, which is the tackling game where you get the scrums and the mauls. But there's also rugby league where you're not tackled, but you're simply tapped on the shoulder, and then you drop the ball for someone else to pick up.
Oh, that's very gentlemanly. Thank you.
With respect, I don't think that's right. That sounds to me like a game we used to play with the children when I was schoolmastering called touch rugby. Rugby league is a nasty, vicious game. It was separated from rugby union a long time ago because the northern clubs wanted to pay their players. And the essential difference between rugby union and rugby league was that rugby league wanted to pay their players, but rugby union was a completely amateur game. There's a recorded instance of somebody who was selected to play for his country and sent his expenses in to the Rugby Football Union for his train fare, and he was claiming £5. It was a long time ago. And the Rugby Football Union, the secretary wrote back and said, sorry, the train fare from wherever it was to London was £4 and 19 shillings and 11 pence. Your claim is wrong. So the player replied, plus 1 penny for the toilet.
Oh, nice one.
Very interesting. That. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more items. We go to Vincent Wright and then Bob Ketz. Vincent, go ahead, unmute, please.
Hi, Roger. Excellent, excellent presentation. I love it when a presentation has a good punch at the end. That's right up my alley. And speaking of that, glebe, the term, I don't know if anybody's familiar with what it means. It's actually a tract of land set aside for the pastor of a church, whether he decides to rent it out or farm on it, whatever. It's strictly there for his income, basically. I know this because I actually live on Glebe Drive in Indianapolis, but the better connection is that the gentleman who did the famous artwork for the front of the Hound of the Baskervilles, a man by the name of Alfred Garth Jones, he actually, when he was in his early 60s, lived on Glebe Place in Chelsea. So the name kind of turns up a little bit everywhere in the Sherlockian community, and I just wanted to point that out to you. I don't have a question for you. I just wanted to tell you that I thought that was amazing.
Good man. Thank you very much. You'll find glebe names all over England.
Interesting. Well, you'll find them here too, because I live in a neighborhood where, the streets are Glebe Street, Glebe Drive, Glebe Avenue, so on and so forth. We tell people it sounds Glebe because it sounds more French. And
oh, nice one.
Because glebe sounds kind of corny, but anyway, excellent presentation, sir.
Thank you, Vincent. Bob Ketz, you had an item?
Yeah, just to echo Roger, thanks first of all for a wonderful presentation, Roger. You'd mentioned you didn't play rugby, and I think a lot of that explains why you're still mentally intact at our pretty close to respective ages. 2 of my sons, and this is odd to hear from a Yankee, but it's true, 2 of my sons attended Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, and both of them played rugby, but they're smart enough to have not told me this because I would have been aghast. And it was only when the second of my 2 sons was about to finish college that he fessed up and invited me to attend the Harvard-Dartmouth rugby game, which was for the championship of the Ivy League. And you can imagine how much money a lot of the parents were paying to have their kids be there to participate in it. And I did go to the game, and I've actually seen less violent gang warfare in the South Bronx in the 1970s than I did at the Harvard-Dartmouth rugby game. It was really pretty brutal. The only good thing I can say came of it, other than the fact that my 2 kids seem intact still at this point, is that when BSI Press is coming out with the new book in January on the missing 3/4 for the manuscript series with a lovely annotation by Phil Burgum, one of the things that we tried to do was explain rugby for the American audience. And I was able to call upon my 2 sons to help Don Isban write the article, which puts rugby into American English. So that was at least useful. But as I said, if my kids had told me early on that they were playing rugby, I can assure you I would have taken them out of Dartmouth and sent them to, I don't know, finishing school or God knows what, but they sure as heck wouldn't have been allowed to play rugby.
Who won the game, Bob? Who won that game?
Dartmouth won, much to everybody's delight. I think it was more a matter of surviving than winning. It was kind of like a last man standing. I was very pleased that I was not a Dartmouth College rugby physician because it really, as I said, I've seen more pleasant events play out in the emergency room in the South Bronx in New York in the 1970s than I did between Harvard and Dartmouth. So it's not a game for the faint of heart.
Yeah, yeah, I'll go along with that.
Thank you,
There's a
Bob.
terrific story in the early Jeeves stories where Bertie Wooster describes watching a rugger match. And it's something he would not have experienced at his own school. So, but it's brilliantly done.
So, Roger, thank you so very much for this presentation. I think we all enjoyed it very much. It went by very quickly. I thank you so much. I'm reminded of the quote from, I want to say it's The Adventure of the Noble Bachelor, and I'm going to butcher this. It's always a joy to meet an American, for I am one of those that believe that the folly of a monarch and of the blundering of a minister in foregone years will not prevent our children from being someday citizens of the same worldwide country under a flag which will be a quartering of the Union Jack and the Stars and Stripes. We call that a subtle transition as we go into our investiture phase now. By giving a learned presentation at one of our meetings here, Roger is going to become a certified SOB. I am sure this will be one of his great honors that he will cherish forever. There was a time, though, where the feelings between the UK and the United States were not the same. And that leads us to his investiture. Roger will have the investiture of Fort McHenry going forward. Back in 1814, the British came to the States. In August, they burned Washington, D.C., a few buildings there, and then came up the Chesapeake Bay to the nest of pirates that they called Baltimore City. If it were not for the brave citizens of Baltimore, there's a very good chance that today we will all be speaking English here. Oh, wait. So Roger will have the investiture of Fort McHenry. Roger chose this investiture in part way because it reminds him of an establishment near where he lives. I believe it's Tyburn Fort?
Tilbury.
Tilbury Fort.
Tilbury Fort. Yep.
Which, as you can see, has some of the same characteristics of Fort McHenry. So, Roger, congratulations. I hope you are proud to become a certified SOB.
I am indeed. And one of the reasons I chose that particular investiture is because, as some of you know, my wife and fellow Sherlockian is American. What I didn't tell you, Greg, is that she has ancestry who fought on both sides of the War of Independence. So.
Oh. Well, that way you always have some relatives on the winning side, no matter what there.
Well, yeah.
So thank you very much. We're gonna make a quick announcement. In a few minutes, we'll be breaking this down into smaller groups so that you folks can talk and mingle among yourselves. So often during these meetings, you just have a few talking heads. You really don't get to have conversations with each other. We will be breaking this room down into 4 other groups. The first room will be Sabatina's, where we normally would be having these meetings if things were normal. We hope to be able to return there early next year. Our second choice for the meeting room is Halsner's Restaurant. Halsner's was famous in Baltimore for over 50 years. Lots of artwork, and they were also noted for their desserts, such as their strawberry pie there that you can see on the right-hand side. The third room we'll be sending you off to will be the House of Welsh. This was one of the few buildings that survived the Great Baltimore Fire of 1904, and was lucky to have the only telegraph wires that were still working after that fire. So it was the word to the outside world after that fire. The 6 Napoleons of Baltimore will also meet in this place during the 1960s. And the fourth room we could assign you to is the 2 o'clock club. There are some members here that are familiar with this establishment. It was the home of Blaise Starr, the burlesque dancer in the 1950s, and she would later go on to own this establishment. There is one SOB in this room right now who wanted their investiture to be Blaise Starr, but we did not allow that. That is a story we're not quite ready for yet. A few years ago, during the 30th anniversary running of the Silver Blaze Southern Division here in Maryland, I made the argument that Blaze Star was inspired by Silver Blaze to take her name. And on our next slide here, we'll have our cover art. So we'll have you there in a few minutes. So just have a few quick announcements here. First, our upcoming meetings here. We want you to save the dates there. Our next meeting will be on January 16th. Joanne Alberstadt will be talking on ACD and the Ghost Ship, the Mary Celeste. And we'll also be having Mark Jones from the Doings of Doyle podcast. He'll be discussing the story Danger, Submarines, Subterfuge, and Submission, the British Empire on the Brink in Danger, and other stories. Hopefully they are not scared off by what they have seen here today. So please join us for that on January 16th. I will post the link so you can register for that meeting in a few minutes. We will be having 8 quarterly meetings next year. These are irregular times here, so the dates that are down the bottom. Since you folks have registered, you will be getting our future mailing list. I will have one more announcement that I have to make. On Christmas Day. Christmas Day is a little different this year. Many of you are not going to be traveling to see your families. You will go to sporting events or you would see movies in years past. We're going to try to recreate Christmas night 1939. The 4th Garrett will be on Facebook Live that night at 8 p.m., the same time as it was in 1939. There will be a table read of the script for the Radio Ventures, the 3 Garrett. So one written by Edith Meiser. We'll be doing that on Facebook Live on Friday, December 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully you can join us. All the actors from that play are on this call right now. Hopefully you can talk to them in the chat rooms afterwards, get their autograph before they become too famous on Friday. So that should be fun. We have some other announcements here. Steve Mason, you had a few. Steve, can you unmute?
I would actually, on the essay contest, I think I would rather turn it over to Denny Dobry if he's willing to talk about the essay contest.
Denny, are you available?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, for putting this up. I had a copy I was going to show if you didn't come through, but as usual, he came through. Anyway, most of you, I'm sure, know some young people who are probably sitting at home right now playing a video game. And what I would suggest, or actually urge you to do, is to hand them a copy of the canon and say, hey, guess what? You can earn yourself some money. All you have to do is read the story and write an essay on it, submit it, and maybe you'll wind up with $300 in your pocket to buy some more video games, whatever it takes. But anyway, I would certainly urge you to check with the young people in your world and make them aware of the essay contest, the Joel Sentner Senior Memorial Essay Contest. You can get the details at the website of the Beacon Society, www.beaconsociety.com. And I certainly encourage you to follow through with it. Thanks a lot, Greg, and thank you, Steve.
Sure. The other thing I did want to mention about the Beacon Society is, we took over the administration of the Fortescue Scholarship Exam several years ago, and many of y'all on this call have taken the 3 tests. This last year, we came out with a recertification test, an optional one just for the fun of it, to allow people to have something to do during the pandemic. We're going to put out another recertification, the 2021 recertification test next week as your Christmas gift. And so it'll come to Greg as the Scion leader and anybody else that has signed up in the past. So look forward to that. That's it, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Rob Nunn, do you have an announcement?
I don't think so. Am I supposed to?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. Andrew Basford, do you have an upcoming meeting you'd like to promote?
Well, our next meeting will actually be next year, the 15th of January. We're still determining which story that happened in January we will be covering, but we'll be getting that together as we go along. Now, you can go to our e-newsletter at whalingnews.com, or excuse me, whalingnews.wordpress.com as we get more information about that. I'll put that on the chat.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And I just thought of this, so this is going to be a surprise to Mark Alberstadt. Mark has prepared a downloadable PDF calendar of Sherlockian events for next year. Be a perfect thing to write all these dates down. Mark, if you could put the link in the chat there so people can download that, we appreciate it. So sorry for throwing that curveball at you. Mike McSwiggan has an announcement.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Just wanted to mention something I'm posting into the chat right now. It's kind of lengthy. My dear late friend, Paul Herbert, who passed away in 2018. He was secretly the Dr. Watson of the BSI. He was a noted collector. He had an amazing collection. His widow, Barbara, and I have slowly been liquidating some things over time, but his collection was so enormous that it's kind of impossible to liquidate a collection like that way. So starting on Holmes's birthday in January, going from the 6th through the 10th, there's going to be an auction at Everything But the House, which is ebth.com. I have all the details there, along with the auction code in the chat. If you're interested, you might want to sign up early. And frankly, if you're just a collector, that's an auction site that kind of flies under the radar. You can often find really awesome things there if you can set up a free account. There's going to be some amazing stuff. I completely stole a Facebook post by Howard Ostrom, which really has all the details. That's what I...
You thief.
Of his last bow that Doyle gave to Houdini. It has Houdini's widow's book plate in there. Really just neat stuff. So go there. Feel free to find me online. Ask me any questions. I'm on Facebook, Mike McSwiggan, or mikemcswiggan@gmail.com. Happy to give you more information. And there's no reserve on anything. So you're going to be able to find some neat stuff. Thanks. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Mike. At 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Monica Smith will be hosting a movie screening. Monica, would you like to say something about that real quick?
Oh, sure. So since we've been in quarantine, or at least we've been forced to socially distance and not actually do in-person events, I've been hosting movie screenings every Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. I believe for our friends across the pond, that would be 9 p.m. your time. I'll include the link in the chat. Today, we are screening the Granada version of The Blue Carbuncle in honor of the holiday season. The Curious Collectors of Baker Street are doing the Cushing version tomorrow afternoon as well. And anybody who attends the screening this afternoon for the Theater Goers Homeward Bound screening will also have an opportunity to grab the link for tomorrow's screening as well.
Are there any other announcements that I may have missed, or somebody wants to say real quick?
Greg. Denny.
Yes.
Yeah, real quick.
Yes.
I know I'm being very optimistic here, but we had planned an open house and a bookmark here at Reading, PA in May, and of course that didn't happen. I am going to try to reserve May 22nd of next year to have the book fair and the open house here at my home. More information will be coming out later. I just wanted to get the date in early because I'm sure there'll be a lot of other groups reserving dates. So I will post a date on Ron Fish's calendar, and more information will be coming shortly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Denny. Any other announcements? Go to the order. If not, since Evie gave a toast to her investiture today, she will not be reading 221B, but in her place, we'll have Monica Smith. Monica has been known to recite this at 2:21 in the morning during BSI weekend. I did not know this personally because I'm in bed by that time. And I will stick to that story. Monica, 221B, please.
Here dwell together still two men of note, who never lived and so can never die. How very near they seem, yet how remote, that age before the world went all awry. But still the game's afoot with those with ears, attuned to catch the distant view, Hello. England is England, yet for all of our fears, only those things the heart believes are true. A yellow fog swirls past the window pane as night descends upon this fabled street. A lonely hansom splashes through the rain. The ghostly gas lamps fail at 20 feet. Here, though the world explode, these two survive, and it is always 1895.
Thank you, Monica. In just a minute, we'll be sending you all out to the breakout rooms. I would just like to take a moment here. It was 7 Christmases ago that I woke up, looked out the window, and was very disappointed to see that I did not have a brand new car with a big red bow on it. Obviously, Santa Claus had left the keys in the ignition, and if you've ever watched The Wire, you know that is something you do not do here in Baltimore. Later on that morning, I then got dressed, went to a restaurant. They were having an all-day brunch with bottomless adult beverages. I am about 100 feet away from that establishment when I step on a sidewalk joint somewhat awkwardly, and I break my right ankle severely. I was taken to the hospital that day, and through the other side of the privacy curtain that they have there, I could hear the nurse calling up everyone. She's calling people up saying, you got to come down here and see this. I've never seen anything quite like this, which is not reassuring to me. Usually, I would handle that at any other hospital, except this was Johns Hopkins. You expect them to kind of see it all. They took me into surgery that night. The next morning on Boxing Day, I woke up, I had this giant erector set around my ankle. And after 2 days, I was finally able to go home, where I would spend the next 5+ months in my bed with my foot raised up. The only books that I could reach at that time was my collection of Sherlock Holmes. Thankfully, a few weeks earlier during the Thanksgiving break, I was able to rearrange my bookshelves, or otherwise those would have been Tom Clancy novels. It was during that time I reunited my love with Sherlock Holmes, and it's sort of been downhill ever since then. I've become way more active than I had ever planned. Because of that, I have so many of you folks here today that I consider to be friends, and some of you very good friends that have helped me out at times. If it wasn't for that bad break, I probably would not know many of you here. I consider myself very lucky that day to have met you, and I thank you for your friendship. And with that, I wish you the compliments of the season. In a second here, we are going to be breaking this down into different rooms. So we will be sending you to breakout rooms. I will have to go back in behind you and then give you co-host capabilities so that you folks can move around. And let's see if this works.